My name is Ramona Diaz, and I spent 20 years in prison for a murder my mother committed. Let me say that again, slowly, because I need you to understand the weight of it. I was 17 years old when I took the fall for my mother, Elena Diaz. I was 17 when I stood in a courtroom in Houston, Texas, and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for the death of my stepfather, Victor Cruz. I was 17 when the judge sentenced me to 25 years, and my mother sat in the gallery dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, the very picture of maternal grief. The truth is simpler and uglier than anyone wanted to hear. Victor was a monster, violent, drunk, prone to rages that left bruises on my mother's arms and later on my own. He had been abusing her for years before he married her, and he had been abusing me since I turned 13, when I developed curves he said were asking for it. I won't describe what he did to me. Some memories are too heavy for language, too dark for the page. I will only say that by the time I was 16, I had memorized the sound of his belt buckle and the way my mother looked away when he came to my room at night. On the night Victor died, I was not the one holding the knife. I was in the kitchen, trying to make myself invisible, when I heard my mother scream. Not her usual scream, the one that meant, "He's hitting me again." This was different. This was a scream of pure, undiluted rage. I ran into the living room and saw my mother standing over Victor's body. The carving knife from the kitchen was in her hand, buried to the hilt in his chest. Blood was everywhere. On her hands, on her white blouse, on the beige carpet she had chosen because it hid stains. Victor's eyes were open, already glassy, already gone. "Mama," I whispered. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw the woman she had been before Victor, young, frightened, but not yet broken. Then her face hardened. "Help me clean this up," she said. "We have to make it look like self-defense." I was 17. I was terrified. I loved my mother the way a drowning person loves air, without thought, without choice, as a matter of survival. I helped her clean the blood. I helped her reposition the knife. I helped her call 911 and tell the operator that I had killed Victor because he was attacking her. The police believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was a small woman, crying, shaking, clutching her teenage daughter. I was the one with the scratches on my arms from our clumsy attempt to stage a struggle. I was the one who couldn't stop trembling, couldn't stop crying, couldn't keep my story straight. The detectives pressured me for hours, and in the end, I confessed. Not because I was guilty, but because I was exhausted and terrified, and my mother had promised me that she would get me a good lawyer, that she would testify that I had acted in self-defense, that I wouldn't serve more than a few years. She got me a public defender who had passed the bar 6 months earlier and had never tried a murder case. She testified, all right. Testified that she had seen me stab Victor in a fit of rage after he looked at me wrong. She embellished details, made me sound unstable, dangerous. She painted herself as a victim of her own violent daughter. I learned later from a fellow inmate what my mother had been promised in exchange for that testimony. Victor had a life insurance policy worth $500,000, payable to his spouse. But the policy had a clause. If the beneficiary was convicted of killing the insured, the payout was void. If, however, someone else was convicted, a jealous stepdaughter say, the beneficiary still collected. My mother collected. She bought a house in the suburbs. She started a small catering business. She remarried within 2 years, a quiet accountant named Leonard who had no idea about her past. And she visited me exactly 3 times in the first 5 years of my sentence, each visit shorter and colder than the last. The last time she came, I was 22. I had been in prison for 5 years. I had learned to fight, to survive, to read people the way a card counter reads a deck. I looked at my mother across the plexiglass divider and saw nothing of the woman who had raised me. She was wearing pearls. She had gotten her teeth whitened. She smelled like expensive perfume. "I can't keep coming, Ramona," she said. "It's too hard on me. I need to move on with my life." "My life," I said. "You need to move on with my life. The one you stole." She didn't flinch. "You made your choices. You confessed. I didn't make you do anything." That was the moment I stopped being her daughter. That was the moment I became something else. Something harder, colder, more patient. I looked at her through the glass, and I made a vow. I would get out of this place, and I would take everything from her. Not revenge, justice. There's a difference, though I wouldn't understand it fully for another 15 years. Prison teaches you things that no university can. It teaches you that time is both infinite and meaningless. It teaches you that survival depends on small routines. Making your bunk, counting the days, memorizing the faces of the guards who might hurt you and the ones who might look the other way. It teaches you that the worst prisons are the ones inside your own head, and that the only way out is through. I used my time. I got my GED. I took college courses through a correspondence program, earning credits in psychology and criminal justice. I worked in the prison library, learning the law, memorizing the statutes about self-defense, duress, and coerced confessions. I wrote letters, hundreds of letters, to legal aid organizations, to journalists, to anyone who might listen to my story. Most of them ignored me. Some wrote back polite form letters saying they couldn't help. One, a young lawyer named Sarah Okonkwo, fresh out of law school and working for a non-profit that specialized in wrongful convictions, actually read my file. She visited me in person when I was 32, 15 years into my sentence. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her. Every detail, from the night Victor died to my mother's betrayal to the 17 years of abuse that had preceded it. I told her about the bruises I had photographed with a disposable camera I'd hidden under my mattress. I told her about the journal I had kept, starting at age 14, documenting every time Victor touched me, every time my mother looked away. I had hidden that journal in the hollowed-out space behind my bedroom baseboard, and it was still there, or so I hoped, waiting for someone to find it. Sarah got permission to search my mother's house. By then, my mother had divorced Leonard and moved to a smaller place, but the baseboard was still there, and the journal was still behind it, wrapped in plastic, preserved like a time capsule of pain. Sarah also found something else, a letter my mother had written to her sister, dated 3 weeks after Victor's death, in which she confessed to the murder and bragged about framing me. "Ramona is young," she wrote. "She'll survive prison. I've already survived too much to let this ruin me." The letter was the key. Combined with the journal, the forensic evidence that had been ignored at trial, and a new analysis of the blood spatter patterns, which proved that the knife had been wielded by someone taller than 17-year-old me, Sarah built a case that was undeniable. The hearing was scheduled for my 37th birthday. I had been in prison for 20 years. My mother was summoned to testify. She arrived in a navy blue dress, her hair dyed a shade of brown that didn't quite hide the grey, her face lined with the particular hardness of a woman who has lied to herself for decades. Under Sarah's questioning, my mother's story crumbled. She admitted first that Victor had been abusive, then that she had been afraid of him, then that she had, maybe, picked up the knife. Finally, under cross-examination from a prosecutor who had been forced to re-examine the case, she broke down and confessed to everything. "I killed him," she said, her voice small, almost wondering. "I killed him because I couldn't take one more night. And Ramona was there, and she was so strong, and I thought she could handle it. I thought I would get her out later. But then the insurance money came, and I was afraid if I told the truth, I would lose everything. So I kept lying until the lie became the only truth I remembered." The judge vacated my conviction that afternoon. I walked out of the prison gates at 4:47 p.m., wearing clothes Sarah had bought for me, jeans, a sweater, boots that didn't pinch. The sky was the colour of washed denim, and the air smelled like rain and freedom, and I stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, just breathing. My mother was arrested the next day. She was charged with perjury, obstruction of justice, and the original murder of Victor Cruz. She pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. At her trial, I was called as a witness for the prosecution. I sat in the same courtroom where I had been convicted 20 years earlier, looked at my mother across the same kind of distance, and told the truth. She was sentenced to 25 years, the same sentence I had served. She is now in the same women's prison where I spent 2 decades, sleeping in a bunk that might once have been mine. I have not visited her. I will not visit her. Some debts are paid in silence. But here is what I did do. I sued her estate for the insurance money she had stolen. The court awarded me the $500,000 plus interest and damages totaling nearly $1.2 million. I used that money to start a non-profit foundation, the Diaz Advocacy Project, that provides legal representation to incarcerated survivors of domestic violence who were coerced into false confessions. In the first 3 years, we helped free 11 women, 11 lives, pulled back from the abyss. I also wrote a memoir, The Will of Iron. That's the title. The one my mother used to call me when she was angry, when I fought back against Victor before I learned that fighting only made it worse. The book became a bestseller, then a documentary, then a movement. I have spoken at the United Nations, at the White House, at prisons across the country where women write me letters that begin, "I thought I was alone." My name is Ramona Diaz. I am not a murderer. I am not a victim. I am a survivor who refused to let her mother's sin become her life sentence. The system failed me for 20 years, but I did not fail myself. I read, I learned, I waited, and I built an army of advocates who believe that justice is not a privilege for the lucky. It is a right for the brave. My mother calls me sometimes from inside. The prison allows her one 15-minute phone call per week. She has my number. I have never answered. I don't need to hear her voice to know that she is sorry or that she isn't, or that the distance between apology and amends is the difference between a life saved and a life stolen. I forgave her long ago. Not because she deserves it, but because I deserve the peace that forgiveness brings. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. Forgiveness is the act of releasing a burden that was never yours to carry in the first place. My mother killed a man. I have killed nothing but the idea that I was powerless. And in the end, that was the only revenge that mattered. Not the ruin of her life, but the rebuilding of mine.